Hello, everyone, and welcome to Youth Positively Speaking. My name is Paige Ewing, and my pronouns are she, her, and I work at Prevention Resources as the multimedia specialist for Positive Youth. Prevention Resources is a nonprofit located in New Jersey that is dedicated to promoting health and wellness of individuals, families, and community through education, collaboration, advocacy, and treatment. As always, I have with me Erin Cohen, the project coordinator of Positive Youth, and my co-host.
Hi, I'm Erin Cohen, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am the Positive Youth Project Coordinator, and the Positive Youth Initiative focuses on building countywide capacity to reduce substance misuse among youth ages 9 to 20 in Hunterdon County.
And so today we are joined by our two featured youth members, Max and Kayla. So welcome, Kayla, to the podcast. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I am 17 years old. I live in New Jersey, obviously. And I came out probably like a year and a half ago now, maybe 2 years. I identify as bisexual with a large question mark because I'm not 100% sure. And I feel like it's such a fluid thing. But yeah.
Well, welcome, Kayla, and also welcome, Max. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself too?
Hi, I'm Max. I use he, him pronouns and sometimes he, they. I'm 14, I live in New Jersey, and I came out as trans this year.
Amazing. We also have with us Kaylyn Bettencourt. She is our expert for this episode. So Kaylyn, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
I'm Kaylyn. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a student social worker with Prevention Resources, getting my master's in social work. I am working to be the facilitator of a new group called Icons that Prevention Resources is doing. I am part of the queer community, and I've worked a lot with both youth and adults through high school and college. So it's a real passion of mine to work with this community.
So you listeners might have been able to tell from our introductions of our guests today. And also you might just know that Pride Month is celebrated annually in June to honor the 1969 Stonewall riots. And it works to achieve equal justice and equal opportunity for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and questioning Americans. So this month we are focusing our efforts on shining the light on the LGBTQ community and how this community is impacted more heavily by substance use, suicide, and other issues. But just a little bit of history, because I do love history, to let you guys know a little bit more about Pride Month. So in June of 1969, patrons and supporters of the Stonewall Inn in New York City, they staged an uprising to resist the police harassment and persecution to which LGBTQ Americans were commonly subjected. And this uprising marks the beginning of a movement to outlaw discriminatory laws and practices against LGBTQ Americans. And today, celebrations include pride parades, picnics, parties, workshops, concerts, symposia, and the LGBTQ Pride Month attracts millions of participants all around the world. Memorials are often held during this month for members of the community who have been lost to hate crimes, HIV/AIDS, and other things. And the purpose of this commemorative month is to recognize the impact that LGBTQ Americans and individuals have had on history, both locally, nationally, and internationally. So you may have heard in our introductions that we included the pronouns that we identify with, and you can see them on our names below on the little Zoom boxes as well. So I really want to start off this conversation about pronouns and names and why they're so important, especially for those in the LGBTQ community. So that's where we're going to start today.
I guess I can start us off. For me personally, I feel like gender is a very confusing thing. I do use she, her pronouns, but I have recently started questioning that because it's just so fluid for so many people. And I think it's about comfortability, especially because you don't feel like yourself. I can't speak fully to that because I'm not trans. I don't experience gender dysphoria or anything like that. But having transgender friends, I can just see the difference in how they act and how they feel when they're being identified properly and being treated with the respect of using their actual pronouns.
Yeah, I can speak to the whole gender dysphoria thing, like presenting as female in public and like being called she, her, like that's just in general, it doesn't feel great. And then like you go home and you're in this like body that doesn't really like fit, if that makes sense. And so just overall, it's like, it's really difficult. But once I did figure out my pronouns, like it's helped so much being like called by my name and my pronouns in public and in school and just in general, just like being called the right pronouns is really important.
And I
Definitely.
think, go ahead.
From a standpoint of someone who works with people in a more clinical setting, using the correct pronouns is such an easy way to affirm and validate someone. And the difference that you see in how someone carries themselves is awesome. So asking pronouns is never a bad question.
Agreed. And that is why we always talk about how language matters. We just had our podcast about how language matters, and it is really evident. And I want to talk a little bit about the Trevor Project. So the Trevor Project was founded in 1998 by the creators of the Academy Award-winning short film Trevor. The Trevor Project is the leading national organization providing crisis intervention and suicide prevention services to the LGBTQ youth under the age of 25. And every year now they do a survey that talks about LGBTQ youth mental health. And in 2021, they had 35,000 youth ages 13 to 24 in the United States who filled this out. And this is the most diverse one yet. So 45% of them are LGBT youth of color and 30% are transgender or non-binary. And the reason that I'm bringing up the Trevor Project when we're talking about having that respect for using the correct pronouns is that it reduces suicide drastically. The risk of suicide is huge in the LGBTQ community, but it is sliced in half if you're using the pronouns correctly.
And I think too, I think about older generations that I've had contact with, and they get so hung up on it, and they're like, this is really hard. And I'm like, well, when somebody gets married, you use their new last name, like it's nobody's business. And even especially for the they them pronouns, the ones that don't necessarily conform to the feminine or masculine sort of pronoun. And also, if you can hear my dog in the background, I'm so sorry. There's another dog outside and she is whining away. But we use they pronouns all the time. Somebody forgets their bag and they say, oh, I hope they come back and get their bag. Well, that's the they them pronoun, and we use it colloquially all the time. We switch people's last names, so why can't we switch their pronouns when they now identify with a different pronoun than they previously used? And so I think it's just that mindset of being, people always say like, oh, I'm so sick of political correctness. I'm like, it's not political correctness, it's being respectful of other people. And being respectful and being kind is so important. And so using the correct name, using the correct pronouns. I mean, that's what you were saying, Max. Like, you feel so much better when people use the pronouns in the name that you choose, that you want.
And so, Max, I do want to ask you a question. At what point did you feel inside that you were different than the outside?
I think I've always kind of like, even like when I was younger, I used to like consciously start doing things that like boys would do, or I would start like consciously like not dressing like a boy per se, but like presenting myself as one. And I just thought it was just like, oh, that's just cool, I want to try that out. But recently, it was in the summer, I think, my friend told me that he was trans, and that was kind of when I started to question my own gender a bit. So I tried out like they them pronouns, I tried out she they, and eventually I got around to like he they, and I asked my friends to start using that and start using my name, and I tried it out for like a week. I just wanted to try it out, see how it felt, and then that's when I kind of realized that I was a guy.
And
sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Kayla.
I was just going to say, I've recently also I feel like I'm not a man. I don't think I'm a boy, but I do often feel like I don't necessarily feel like I'm female either. So I've recently started asking my friends to just try using she, they pronouns and just see how it feels, because it's such an easy like change for people to make. You're not really asking much of them. And I personally am really bothered when people can't respect that, because I'm not asking you to go, do some crazy task for me. I'm literally asking you to change like one word. And it's just, if you don't respect the person enough to make them comfortable, then you shouldn't be interacting with them in general. Like, you should just leave that person alone.
So let me ask you about that, because I find I have a 26-year-old. He's my stepson, but I call him my first son because I've been around him for so long. He is gay and he has a lot of friends in the LGBTQ community and who go by they, them all the time. And it's very normal. And then I have two teenagers myself in high school, and it's very normal, kind of like what both of you are saying, Kayla and Max. It's very normal to just change it. It seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, seems to me that it's adults and older people that are the ones that have such a difficult time talking about it, because I feel like all teens I talk to now, gender is not this like, you're a boy, you're a girl. It doesn't seem to be so down pat anymore. And there is a lot of questioning, like, maybe I'm going to go by they. So do you think, Kaylyn, what do you, with your experience, do you think it's the older generation really?
I think it's a change for anyone. I mean, I've been out and a really active member of the community for 10 years, and I still slip up. It's no one's perfect, but the younger generations, I do think, have much more of a flexible and non-binary idea of gender. And I think it's great because it's not a one size fits all scenario. Not everyone falls 95 to 100% to one side or the other of the binary. There's this whole middle ground that we're more open to now. And it's just really nice to see the younger generations being so open and accepting and flexible with those things.
And I think you bring up a great point is we're not perfect. I know even for me, I am not a part of the community and I work really hard and I read as much as I can, but sometimes I ask a question, they're like, that's not an appropriate question. Or I say something and I'm like, oh, wait, sorry, wrong pronouns. And I switch. And it's so important, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong for you guys. Like if somebody makes a mistake, you just say sorry and you fix it and you move on. And like, is that the best way for somebody who's made a mistake to do it? Or
Yeah, I do feel like once it's made into like a big deal, like when it's like, oh, sorry, I personally feel uncomfortable, like when someone messes up the pronouns and then like apologizes 100 times, and I totally get that they like feel bad, and it's like they don't want to, they're not trying to misgender me, obviously, but it's like I want it to be normal to just kind of like quickly just correct yourself and then move on.
I feel like oops, sorry.
Go ahead, Kayla.
Okay. I was just gonna say, I feel like when people make a big deal out of it, in a way, it's almost like they're not affirming you, if that makes sense, because it seems like they still see you as something else. So they're embarrassed and they make a huge deal out of it because in their mind, you're still a girl or you're still a boy or whatever. So I feel like it's just so much easier and less awkward for everyone for them to just quickly like say, oh, I'm sorry, and like correct themselves as opposed to making it a whole big thing.
yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I even when I became more active as an adult in the community, I came up with a script for myself and to give my friends, and just if you're near the person, look directly at them and say, I'm sorry, correct yourself, and go about the conversation. Or if it's someone that is not present and I'm talking about them, same thing. I'm sorry, correct yourself, go about the conversation. Because sometimes when you give people that script and the permission to just correct yourself, move on, they feel more empowered to do those things.
So I want to talk to all three of you about, are all of you out with your families? Okay, so you all are out with your families. Can you talk a little bit about that coming out process? Because I'm thinking of other teens that are listening to this. We do have some teens that listen. can you tell me a little bit about the coming out process and how that made you feel? Was it difficult? Was it easy? Families accepting, families not accepting?
So when I first started, like when I first like came out, it was kind of unofficial, but when I first started trying out different pronouns, I kind of just like sprang it up at the table. I was like, hey, I'm trying this out. It'd be cool if you can do that. And it was like, I think it was a big adjustment. And I don't think it's like really like recently my family started like using my name and pronouns, but I don't think it really like sank in yet. And so we had another conversation recently, like a few months ago, and I talked about like how it feels hearing my dead name and like she, her and stuff. And it was after that, that like, I think it kind of like, I don't know the right word, but I think it kind of like sank in not a bad way, but it's a big adjustment, and I really get that.
I do think it's a big adjustment for families just in general and as parents just in general. And Kayla, how about you?
I was just going to say, in terms of like your family, it definitely is a big adjustment because even for me, I was raised in a super open-minded, like very like liberal thoughts. Like we didn't really care about anything. My parents are different religions, like none of that ever really mattered. But I still think that even when I came out for my mom, it was a bit of like not wanting it to be true, not because she doesn't have like respect for LGBTQ people, but because she's aware of the kind of challenges that come with being part of the community. And her main concern from like day one when I told her was being careful and making sure that I knew who I was telling, making sure I was safe about it. Because unfortunately, there are so many repercussions of being out publicly. And for me, just because of my upbringing, I think my family didn't really care. I think a lot of parents claim like, oh, I always knew and all that. But I think my family actually probably did always know because I never really cared about like gender and like I was never boy crazy. And like I was openly making comments about like, oh, that girl's cute or that boy's cute. So like I just texted my mom because I was in a gender and sexuality alliance at my school and everyone was talking about their coming out stories and I was like, oh, I guess I never came out. And I just assumed my family knew. So I texted my mom and I was like, you know that I like boys and girls, right? And she goes, yeah, oh, we already established that. And I was like, okay. So we just kind of moved past it.
I do think that's a concern for parents, is not that you're necessarily LGBTQ, but that you may have more hardships as being in that community. And one of the things that I want to talk about is the discrimination. This is part of that Trevor Project survey. And it's at 75% of LGBTQ youth say they have experienced discrimination based on their sexual orientation or gender identity at least one time in their lifetime. 75%. So every 3 out of 4. And I think that that is probably why parents get a little nervous when you come out, because they think about what is it going to be like for you? Because as parents, we want to protect you, right? So Kaylyn, can you just tell us a little bit about your coming out too?
Yeah. First of all, I just got a little emotional, like hearing your guys' stories, because that is like ideal. What I think we should strive for is like creating a environment where our kids don't even have to really make some sort of like announcement, or like they just say it and we move on and we accept. And like that was really, really nice to hear. Personally, I am a little bit older than you guys, which I like to pretend I'm not, but
I say that in every episode, Karen. I hope you realize, because Paige could be my daughter.
Yeah, no, I'm like, I graduated high school a year ago. No, it's been like almost 10 years since I've like was a freshman in high school, which is terrifying. But I was kind of part of age range where it was still a little bit of a significant taboo. I kind of had a phase coming out, I like to call it. I came out to my friends and like close friends when I was like 14, 15. I came out to select adults and family members when I was like 17 to 19. And then when I had a significant partner that I wanted to actually introduce my immediate family to, that's when I actually came out at 22 as a lesbian. And my immediate family, very similar, was cool about it. I was a little bit of an angsty teenager. So my dad, I remember like vividly saying, are you going to be less angry now? So I have like that humorous experience. And then when I was like 22, 23, my grandparents and like older family members, I actually came out to, and I'm still coming out because every time you go into a new work environment or school setting or meet new friends, like there is a little bit of that like coming out experience. But overall, I had a really good experience. I definitely had people in high school who were actually my age who, because of their religion, tried to like fix me. And I did have that like weird experience of losing some friends over it. But I mean, overall, I know I had a very privileged coming out experience, and so many people don't have that positive reaction from really important people in their life.
And I think that makes a huge impact on people. And especially what you said is it's a constant coming out, and you never know when you're going to hit that stigma or that discrimination. Who is it going to come from? And so I think, we know from the Trevor Project, and we just know from our own work in prevention, that people within the community have a lot higher risk of substance use, because they're using substances to cope with that stigma and discrimination, and maybe even internalized homophobia. Maybe they were raised in the Catholic Church and they're coming to grips with, all this stuff. And there's so many things that go on during that process. And then also, historically, the bar culture, bars were a very safe place historically for people in the community to go to. And I think we see that now, like with pride parades, there's always alcohol. I mean, what's that vodka company? They do like a Pride Month alcohol.
Is it Tito's?
Yeah. And I think it's Smirnoff. They do a whole campaign about a whole campaign directed at LGBTQ people, because they know that they're probably going to drink at Pride, but they don't realize that, a lot of people in the community have a substance use problem. And so they're targeting the people who are more at risk for it, which is not great.
Right. Well, and I feel like with teenagers, just in general, you're trying drinking because you're curious, you want to fit in. And then if you compound it on some of the issues that you're facing, because LGBTQ youth are more prone to anxiety and depression because they're trying to figure out who they are they going to be accepted? Maybe they're not accepted at home. And so you've already have the risk factors of just being a teenager in general, where your brain's not developed and, you want to try it just to see what it's like. And then you're trying to figure out how to deal with how you're feeling inside, and it is very scary. And I, when you guys were talking about your coming out stories, I was thinking about when my son came out. And Kayla, it's exactly what you said. We knew. I remember telling my husband, his dad, so I obviously didn't give birth to him. I told my husband when he was 7 years old, I said, I want you to remember this conversation. If he ever comes and tells us he's gay, I want you to remember that I said it when he was 7 years old, because I just felt like he was, and it didn't matter, obviously. And he did. When he was 18 is when he came out to us, and he said, are you surprised? And I said, no, we knew. Is dad surprised? Does dad know? And I said, dad knows, and it's okay, but I know when you're talking about religion, Kaylyn, it happens. You see people out there that say things and they may not know what your family is like or who's in that, we had an experience where my kids were playing with another kid who is Catholic, and he told my children that if you are gay, you get kicked out of your family. And when my children came in, it really almost makes me want to tear up, because they came in and I thought, their older brother is gay, and how dare you say something like that? Because to me, there's nothing worse than not having your children. Like, I can't understand why being gay or trans is worse than not having them. Like, that just makes no sense to me. So that's something that clearly still bothers to me to this day, because I would rather have someone for whoever they are than not at all because of something like this.
I actually just did like a year-long study on the impact of like religion on the mental health of LGBTQ teens. And I focused specifically on one religion, but in order to like really do that, I had to look at all different religions. And you really don't know how impactful these things are until you look at some of the statistics. In my personal experience, I spoke with people who were Reformed Jewish, which is pretty relaxed and open. So for me, I didn't see the internalized homophobia or those experiences. But from the research I read, I noticed that in particular, a lot of Christian-based religions had this like, not like don't talk about it kind of mentality, but in a way that's kind of what it was. And even just in personal experiences, like the times when I encounter like homophobia in my school or even just out in public, I feel like it's coming from a place of just being uneducated and being taught by their religion that this is what is right. But you really just have to think about it. And like, if being gay was so disgusting and not okay, why would gay people exist in the first place? Like, if you're the kind of person that thinks God does everything with a purpose, clearly we're here for a reason, you know? So it's frustrating to see that people kind of hide behind that to be hurtful to other people.
Well, speaking of school, how is it at school? Do you find that kids are pretty open, or do you find that there's still, people whispering behind your back or saying something?
At my school, personally, I think it's a really open environment. Like, I'm part of Spectrum Club at school. We have like a table. We had a table set up for Day of Silence, and there was no problems. When I came out as trans, like there was no, like, I didn't feel like there was any kind of like whispering behind my back. I know there's a lot of open LGBTQ members at my school. At my old middle school, it, like before we moved up here, it wasn't as open. It was more of like either a taboo subject or just like, that's weird. Like, I don't know if that's just like a middle school thing, like a
probably because middle schoolers are weird. I taught middle school, so I'm going to just say that. That's a very hard time.
I think everything's weird in middle school.
Yeah.
I've moved a lot. So my coming out process, I think, just happens on a much more frequent basis than for most people. And I'm new this year as a junior. And for me, I found that, like, especially with having like a whole project on it that I have to discuss with my classmates all the time and let them read about, I was very anxious to do that because it was very clear that I had a personal investment in it. And like, you never want to out yourself to a group of people you don't know because it's still not the safest thing. But I found that like it was very well received. People were telling me that I was like picking a really important topic and that we should be talking about mental health in LGBTQ teens. And for just, at least for me, I've never had people say anything bad to me. I think I'm also just kind of a very outspoken person, and they know not to say anything bad about me because I will tell them off. But I've been lucky.
Yeah, again, great thing to hear because I had a little bit of a different experience. I know it can be really difficult. When I was so I graduated in high school in 2014, so a hot minute ago. But when I was in high school, I have this vivid memory of this girl calling me over to her lunch table. And I don't know why I went over because she didn't like me. Um, and she said, I heard that you like girls. And I looked at her and I was like, yeah. And her whole table laughed at me. And then plot twist, she is now part of the community. So I found that a lot of the people that I got flack from were people who were part of the community and just very insecure about it. And it's that whole like stereotype of, people pick on the things that they are insecure about.
Yes.
But even more recently, I worked down in Georgia, and young people even are not as open and accepting there as it is here. It really is a huge difference. I worked in a community that was very highly religious. And so I worked somewhere where there was a lot of trans youth, and that was not accepted, especially because where I worked, they were divided by gender. And so when they have a unit that is all girls and there's trans people on that unit, it can be a really vulnerable and like not a great place to be. So I guess I do want to identify that as wonderful as it sounds where you guys have been, there are still those experiences happening in schools.
I agree. And I think that you're right. It depends on your community and the beliefs in that community. And here I come with another statistic from the Trevor Project, because this to me is very alarming, that 42% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. And that includes more than half of transgender and non-binary youth. So really these students who don't feel like, if they're being separated by boy and girl, and if on the outside you may look like a girl, but on the inside you're identifying as a boy, that is really detrimental and can have them going and thinking about ending their life. Because there's in there, I find that with teens, you can't look past right now. Like in your mind, you're thinking, this is never going to get better. This is never going to get better. If somebody's saying something to you, if you're being bullied or something like that. And, when you're in high school, it feels like it'll never go away. And it does. And then you can go and you can, like Kaylyn, you're saying, I graduated in 2014. I feel like it was yesterday. All of a sudden you have this whole life and it goes past. So if you can just get through some of those difficult times, it will get better at some point. It will get better.
And I think that's something that so many young people, they just don't have time on their side. So when I remember I only graduated high school 4 years ago. And so
you guys are really killing me today.
Sorry.
Me feel so old.
But I remember in high school, I was like, oh my God, this is taking forever. I've been here forever. And now it's, been almost 5 years since I graduated high school. And I'm like, 4 years is such a short time. Like it happens so quickly and you don't even realize how quickly. And I think it's just because the older you get, the more time, and you realize how quick time goes. But when you're in high school, you don't have that perception of time because you have always been in school setting and you haven't done anything else. And so it feels really long. And I know how stuck you can feel when you're in a group that just doesn't accept who you are or is saying that's not true or anything like that. It's the worst feeling in the world. And you just want to shut down. And there's so much more in life and it goes so much longer that's not really a solution because you're missing out on so much.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about how there are resources available and there's things out in the community. So I know, Kayla, at your high school, that there is a club for LGBTQ youth and allies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Max, do you have something like that at your high school as well?
Yeah, there's actually two things I'm a part of. There's Spectrum Club, which is a more like social educating the community kind of thing. And then there's this LGBTQ support group that meets every Monday or Tuesday in guidance. And basically that's like, it's less of a social thing. It's more of like a talk about your experiences, like a not a therapy thing, but like this is a support group. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's great to be able to talk with other kids who are like you and that can understand the experiences. Kaylyn, can you tell us a little bit about Icons, which is this new group that we're forming?
Yeah, so knowing that schools have those experiences is wonderful. But from my own experience, growing up, and then also thinking about people that I've worked with, what happens, A, when you're not in school, B, if your school doesn't have something like that, or if you're not comfortable being in it, and C, the people who choose not to go to college or can't go to college after high school, those communities, which is a huge support for people in our community, what happens in those times. So I, with the help of Erin and Paige and a bunch of other people from Prevention Resources and Positive Youth, came up with Icons, which is the inclusive community of neighborhood supports. And it's a group kind of like what you're explaining, Max, social, community based. And it's for ages 14 to 18. We're hoping maybe a little bit beyond those, but right now 14 to 18. We're going to start meeting on Tuesdays, and I'm hoping to start a couple weeks from now and go through the summer and into the next school year. So you can still have those experiences and that support, even when you don't have that comfort zone of school.
So before we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about parents, since I'm a parent and I'm also a parent of an LGBTQ. He's not a kid anymore, but I still call him a kid. So another statistic from the Trevor Project is, and this really goes back to what you were saying, Kaylyn, only 1 in 3 LGBTQ youth found their home to be LGBTQ affirming. So that means there's a whole lot of kids out there that are not really feeling accepted at home. So I wanted to talk about some tips for parents who may have a child who comes out. And this information I just pulled from Johns Hopkins Medicine, and there were a couple doctors who put together some really great tips. So the first one being, let them know they're loved. So the scariest part of coming out is to your parents. Your parents mean the most to you out of anybody. Look, I'm getting emotional again, thinking about the fact that there's parents out there that don't accept kids. But there is research that shows that LGBTQ youth who are supported by their families grow up to be happier and healthier adults. And that's what we want. And I want to say, I feel like all parents want that. The second thing is to encourage dialogue. The best way is to build trust and start small. Talk to them about who's their friends, what do they like to do? Because then if you're talking about little things, then you're willing to come to your parents about talking about something more complicated. And then learn the facts. It's not just a phase. Embrace it and don't dismiss it. There's no cure. It's not something that needs to get fixed. And I have to tell you, on the Trevor Project survey, I was shocked at how many young LGBTQ youth are still trying to be converted. The conversion, it's just horrifying to me. And don't look for blame. Instead, celebrate your child as they are. And the next step is take a team approach. It's okay to be stressed. So parents, it's okay to be stressed about it or confused or surprised. You may or may not be surprised, but it's okay. And you know what, as the parent, know if you're struggling, that your child is probably struggling more. And if you want to talk to people about it, don't talk to your child about it because they're not your counselor. Talk to your friend, talk to your spouse, talk to a therapist about it. The next step is stay involved with the school. Maintain frequent contact with the teachers, push for more inclusive sex education, look for signs of bullying, and don't hesitate to speak up and advocate for your child. And also ensure they form healthy relationships. So You want to encourage your child to date in a way that's healthy and age appropriate. And here's the thing about social media, because there were, when we were talking about that bar culture before, back in the day, the only way that you could meet people is maybe going to a bar. Now there's social media. So a lot of LGBTQ youth go onto social media to find like-minded kids. But parents, make sure you monitor that as well, because we don't want our teens, it's like this for LGBTQ or not, but you don't want teens seeing things that are inappropriate or engaging in inappropriate behavior. But Kayla, Max, Kaylyn, do you think that those were good tips for parents thinking about what you've been through?
So when we talk about conversion abuse, not conversion therapy, look at what your state is doing, what's going on. Are there bills for banning it? Is it allowed? And really call your representatives and voice your opposition to conversion abuse, because there are youth and adults who are still being abused in those ways. And beyond Pride, there is Transgender Day of Remembrance. There is Transgender Day of Visibility and days of visibility for all the identities. So don't just rainbow out for the month of June, but, think about those important days as well.
I just want to say to all of you, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today and for telling us about your experiences about being members of the LGBTQ community. But before we leave today, I want to mention some resources that are here for anyone in the LGBTQ community, or for someone who's interested in learning more. Maybe it's a parent who has an inkling about their child and you just want to get educated. So we talked a lot about the Trevor Project. And so I want to make sure that everybody has access. They have the Trevor Lifeline, which is a crisis intervention and suicide prevention phone service available 24/7, 365 days a year. The phone number for that lifeline is 866-488-7386. If you're watching on YouTube, it is popping up on your screen right now. And for people who maybe you feel uncomfortable talking on the phone, or you live in a household that doesn't accept that and you're afraid somebody might hear you, they also have Trevor Text for confidential messaging with a Trevor counselor, which is also available 24/7, 365 days a year. And all you have to do is text START to 678-678. And then say you don't have a phone, you get grounded, your phone's taken away, something like that. They also have the Trevor Chat, which is a confidential instant messaging through a computer with a Trevor
And we
counselor.
know y'all have Chromebooks from school. Everybody has a Chromebook at this point.
So that's also available 24/7, and that's through their website. You can just Google Trevor Project and it'll come up. They have lots of resources for LGBTQ youth, including an entire coming out guide with lots of great tips and resources and suggestions and stories. So if you're an LGBTQ youth and you're thinking about coming out and you have no idea where to start, that's a great resource. But they also have a lot of information for allies or people who just want to learn more. And that's all on the Trevor Project Support Center. And maybe some of you want to go a little bit more in depth and you actually want to receive a training. I have worked with the Safe Zone Project. It's a free online resource. It has LGBTQ awareness and ally training, both online and in-person workshops. They offer a free curriculum. You take online classes to learn how to create a safe and inclusive environment, and has a lot of great resources in that too. And of course, locally in Hunterdon County, we have icons for any LGBTQ youth who want to connect with other youth in the community. And I'm really excited that we have that now. So all those resources are on our website. They're down in the description below. If you're watching on YouTube, they popped up on the screen. But of course, for more information about building inclusive communities, please visit our website at njprevent.com/positive youth. And thank you so much for listening in. We'll see you next time for more Youth Positively Speaking.